In the previous episode, I introduced you to Formtastic, which is a fantastic gem for creating forms with very little code. Now, here I am back in my application that we created in the last episode with this form for adding animal records for a veterinarian clinic. So what I want to do is add a many-to-many association here. So in the previous episode, I showed you how easy it was to handle a one-to-many association or belongs to association with the select menu. Formtastic basically created all the code for us for selecting a given category that the animal belongs to. But what I want to do here is add a many-to-many association and show you how Formtastic works with those. Now, since we're building a veterinarian application, let's add a problem model so that we can assign problems to a given animal so we know what to cure. So let's generate some nifty scaffolding here for a model called problem, and this will be have a name, and really that's it. And so what we want to do is generate a many-to-many association between an animal and a given problem, because an animal can have many different problems that they're in for. And now, because this is a many-to-many association, we'll need a join model. So for this joining problem to animal, we'll call it symptom. And then we'll give it a animal ID column and a problem ID column. So it's a pretty standard many-to-many association. And for this, I'm just going to skip the controller because we don't really need to manage that directly. And then we just have to migrate our database. And now let's set up the association. So our problem model has many symptoms, and it has many animals as well through symptoms. And our symptom belongs to an animal, and it belongs to a problem. And our animal has many symptoms and has many problems through symptoms. So there we go. Now notice I am using attribute accessible here to limit exactly what attributes the user can set through a form and mass assignment. So because I'm using this, I'll definitely need to modify this whenever we're adding functionality to the form. So here I'll want to add a problem IDs attribute, so this way we can assign multiple problems to a given animal. And now in our form view, let's just add an input field here called problems. And this way it has many problems through symptoms. So now let's reload this form and see what Formtastic generates for us. Well, as you can see, we now have a list of problems which we can choose from using a multi-select. Now I've already populated our problem records with a few problems here, so let's just select a couple and save our animal here. And notice the mentioned problems here carry across, so after we saved it, properly saved those problems as well. Now what if I want checkboxes here instead of a multi-select menu? And that's actually very easy to do with Formtastic. You just go back to your input field and then add the as option with checkboxes, and there we go. Now when we reload the page, our problems turned into a list of checkboxes, and we can check and uncheck whichever options we want. So as you can see, Formtastic makes it really easy to handle a many-to-many association in your forms. Now you may have noticed the little asterisk next to every form field label. This is to instruct the user that that given field is required and it should be filled in. Now by default, Formtastic just sets every field as required, but you have the option to disable it by using the required option in any input field and just setting it to false. Now when we reload the page, you can see that problems no longer has an asterisk next to it. Now managing this individually for every field is a bit of a pain. Wouldn't it be nice if this was done automatically based on whatever validations you had in your model? And actually Formtastic does support this feature, however it requires that you install this plugin called Validation Reflection. So we'll do a simple script plugin install in that URL. Then after we restart our server and go to the page, notice that there's no more asterisks on any of the fields because none of these have a validation on them. Well, that's easy enough to do. We'll just go to our animal model and add a validates presence of, how about the name attribute and maybe our born on attribute. And now back on our page, watch our labels here. When we reload, magically asterisks appear because those have validates presence of on them. By the way, Formtastic displays validations inline next to the form field. So if we try having no name, submit it, notice it just says can't be blank right next to the form field. I think that's a pretty neat feature, but you can change the behavior of this if you want to. Now it's best to place your configuration options in an initializer file, so we can go under config initializers and just make a new file here. We'll call it Formtastic config, and really it could be called anything. Now if you check out the README, you can see there are a bunch of different configuration options you can use, and they're pretty well documented. So as you can see, you can disable all fields being required by default. You can change the asterisk to any kind of string you want, and you can change the inline error messages, which is exactly what we're looking for. So in our Formtastic config file, we'll just set inline errors to none. So let's try submitting this form field with no name again. And now it just takes us back here, but it doesn't give us any validation error messages. But let's say we want to display these at the top like the standard Rails approach is. Well, you can go back to your form and just use that classic error messages method to just display the error messages at the top of the form. So then when we reload here, you can see we have the error messages at the top like the standard Rails approach was. Now there's another field option which I have yet to show you in Formtastic, and that is hint. And what hint does is just display a little hint message next to the field. So in this case, let's say I use the owner's name if none is provided. And then when we reload the form here, you can see that we now have a nice little hint message underneath the form field. Now what if we want to customize the way this hint message is displayed, or really anything else on this form, for example? Well, you can edit the CSS file that was generated for us in the previous episode. Now the file we need to edit is called Formtastic changes.css, and this is the dedicated place that was generated for us to place our changes that are made to Formtastic's forms. So what we can do here is customize this with any kind of CSS we want. And notice that the inline hints style sheet is already given for us in the documentation here, so let's just customize it to, let's say we want our font style to be italic and our font size to be 11 pixels. And give our page a quick reload, and now notice the hint is nice and tiny and italicized. Now if you want to change some more things in here, I recommend you take a look at the existing formtastic.css file, and this way you can see exactly what it is doing in here, and then you can basically override any of these given parameters for customizing the CSS for each form field. Well, that's it for this episode. I hope you found it helpful, and I hope you do take a look at Formtastic and try it out for yourself, because it really is a great way to generate forms inside of Rails. Now there are a number of features which I have not gone into in this episode, but you still should check them out in the documentation. This page right here is the RDoc pages for the project. And as you can see, you can pass in names to the inputs field method to basically group various input form fields together. And let's see, we have internationalization support, which I did not cover, but you really should check it out if you're interested in that. You could just customize the way form field labels look and so on. So just a lot of additional features to take a look at inside of the RDocs.